Well, it's 2 minutes past the hour, so why don't we go ahead and get kick things off. Again, my name is Whitney Stoll. I'll be your DC Post First Friday webinar host, and welcome back to our DC Post webinar series and our November webinar with our returning guest, Derek Kernis, with his program presentation, CMMC, Unlocking DFARS Compliance, Becoming Certified, and Handling the Rollout. Joined by me is Samantha Long and Bree Beal, who are behind the scenes moderating our webinar today, and will also be monitoring the chat. So we have over 115 registered participants from all over the world, ready to learn during our First Friday webinar. So in today's webinar, Derek will discuss what you need to know how to become CMMC compliant and meet federal cybersecurity standards to support the DoD with greater assurance and safeguarding sensitive national security information. But first, I'd like to start our welcome by introducing you to our First Friday webinar series, which is actually being held on a Thursday this month, which is provided to you through SAME's commitment to offering the AEC community effective training, development, and networking programs. The DC Post is helping sustain the future of the profession with these monthly education-focused sessions aligned with SAME's strategic goals to drive partnerships, deliver solutions, and develop people. So thank you all for joining us here today as we start our program. So please feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself, share your LinkedIn profile, where you're joining us from today, and your email with everyone and anytime throughout the program. Ask questions in the chat so we can address them during the Q&A portion at the end. Things might look a little different as we're using a new virtual platform called Adobe Connect. You can chat with everyone or send messages directly to our hosts, presenters, or to each other throughout today's webinar. So we are recording today's session, and we will post a video on our YouTube channel later on. So a copy of your slides, your PDA certificate, and an opt-in attendee list will be available to download at the end of today's webinar. And we'll also send you a copy as soon as the webinar ends. So be on the lookout for a document delivery subject line with your downloads following today's webinar session. So thank you again for joining us. We're very excited to provide you an hour of education and virtual networking, no matter where you're calling in from. We would like to take a moment to thank our DC Post First Friday sponsors, Fox Rothschild, KCCT, Parsons, and Stantec. We really, truly appreciate your support and grateful for your generosity by making this webinar series possible for our members and SAME community. If you're not already a DC Post sponsor and like to support our post with the annual sponsorship, we'd love to add your name to this slide for future programs and events this year and through 2026. Annual Platinum sponsors and First Friday sponsors help support this webinar event with free registration for SAME members and full-time students. Please visit our website for more information about sponsorship levels and how you can gain visibility for your company while giving back to the SAME community through your DC Post annual sponsorship. So now it's time for the main program. Please note this program will provide one professional development hour from the DC Post. And while I'm not going to read the overall learning objectives to the slide, since most of you saw the same objective when you registered, instead I'm going to introduce you to our featured speaker in just a moment. And when I do the introduction, if you haven't already done so, please use the chat to introduce yourself, share contact information, your LinkedIn profile, and also where you're joining us from today. This is your webinar series for you to learn about the special topic, as well as for you to expand your business network throughout the program. Share comments, ask questions to our presenter. If there's a particular slide you'd like to talk about, please share that detail in the chat. We'll answer the questions at the end of the program. You will not be able to save the chat, so make sure to take any notes of everyone you want to reach out to before the webinar ends. And now I'm pleased to welcome our presenter for the DC Post First Thursday webinar, Derek Kernis, which is CEO of Athon Security Consultant. Derek is a lead certified CMMC assessor who has guided numerous organizations through successful CMMC Level 2 certifications. Derek has a deep expertise with DFARS compliance, as well as NIST SP 800-171. Derek leads a team dedicated to strengthening cybersecurity across the federal contracting community. So Derek, welcome, and now I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Whitney. Appreciate everybody's attendance today. Look forward to discussing the CMMC program and the subsequent requirements with you. Ask you to bear with me as my children have given me the gift of an upper respiratory infection. So I'm going to try to keep that to a minimum as we go through this, but I'll be muting the mic periodically, potentially. Anyway, CMMC is going live this coming Monday, November 10th. And all DoD contractors need to be prepared for what's coming after that date. But before we dive into the program, I want to give everybody an overview of the agenda today. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about why CMMC and how we got to this point today, very briefly. We will cover the cybersecurity clauses associated with the CMMC program. There are actually quite a few that will still be applicable in addition to just the CMMC acquisition requirement. The benefits and impacts to your organizations related to this requirement and how this can be a business enabler. We'll talk a little bit about your path to becoming CMMC Level 2 or Level 3 certified, depending on your organization's needs. Talk very briefly about how our organization could help if you determine that help is needed, and discuss a few key takeaways from this presentation. And at the end, we'll open it up to Q&A. I will say, for those of you that attended this, I did a similar webinar last December when the CMMC program rule was finalized, and we'll discuss the difference between the two. This is a little bit of a recap of last year with some additional information. So I will be going through this a little bit quicker and hoping we could have a little bit of time for Q&A. But the first part of CMMC, why CMMC exists, in 2020, the NDAA mandated from Congress, mandated that the Secretary of Defense create a cybersecurity framework for the DIV to verify the contractor requirements were being implemented. What DoD found in 2019 from an audit of 1,000 subcontractors specifically, that less than 1% of the contractors were implementing the requirements, and it was resulting in national security information being exfiltrated and used by our adversaries to create weapons and technologies that the United States is invested in. So there are many threats that are being generated through this. It's IP theft, intelligence collection, so where military personnel are. Since this last webinar from last year, I actually heard a very interesting story from a man who worked at Microsoft, that he was being tracked by Middle Eastern adversaries because they were able to collect intelligence on where he and his family were at all times. So there's a lot of talk about weapon systems, and it's not just that, it's where military personnel are, information about the bases that they're located in and what vulnerabilities may exist in those, in addition to supply chain disruption. And we've seen some of this, like the Colonial Pipeline attack, sparingly on water systems within the United States. And it is known that China is doing that in an attempt to identify how the United States will react in those events where that critical infrastructure is completely cut off, and an evaluation for future attack on us. It is causing our economy to lose billions of dollars. Again, money that we've invested, where our adversaries are taking our intelligence, our information, our IP, and they are specifically, if we're focusing on technology and even things like building design, they are taking that information and creating the same things, improving upon them for a fraction of the cost, because they don't have to spend as much time with the initial development. And the other reason CMMC was created is because the DoD also recognized that they did not have the ability to scale to verify the implementation of these requirements to the bureaucracy that is the United States government. So they realized they needed to create a third-party ecosystem and create a structured framework in which to allow the contractors to be evaluated for the implementation. So they came up with the CMMC program where there is a balance between evaluating some contractors, not all, but approximately half at this point, a little more than half, they're expecting to need these requirements. And the other half that will need CMMC Level 1 can still self-affirm. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But what they did is they created a third-party ecosystem, or I should say they contracted with a third party to create an ecosystem that allows private industry to verify the implementation of these requirements for CMMC Level 2. We'll dive into the CMMC program here in a moment, but it's important for all the contractors here to understand, and government personnel as well, that there are actually two existing cybersecurity clauses that 2/3 of the CMMC program is derived from, that exist today and will still be contractual requirements moving forward. The first is a FAR clause, FAR 52.204-21, so it should be 204 there. It's basic safeguarding of covered contractor information systems, and that is to protect federal contract information. So in that FAR clause, there are 15 controls that are outlined that are basic cybersecurity controls where the government wants federal contract information protected. This is actually required on every government contract, not just DoD. That's, again, FAR clause. There is also the original safeguarding CUI clause. It's called safeguarding covered defense information on non-government systems, and the incident reporting requirements associated with those. So this is the original CUI clause where contractors could self-affirm, or self-attest was the language used at the time, to meeting these requirements. And what it says, a couple of the core things here. The contractor, if they're handling controlled defense information, is the language that the DoD uses for controlled unclassified information. They need to implement the most current version of NIST 800-171. So that is actually currently revision 3, but the DoD has issued a class deviation that says we want the defense industrial base to stay on revision 2 right now. We'll talk about that with CMMC as well. It has incident reporting requirements and data handling requirements to support cybersecurity investigations. And then a couple of other key things that are very relevant to small businesses and even enterprise organizations are making heavy use of, many of them are making heavy use of cloud services. If cloud services are used to handle controlled unclassified information, so process, store, transmit CUI, they need to be FedRAMP moderate authorized or equivalent. And they also need to make sure those cloud service providers are meeting the incident reporting requirements in that DFARS clause that are in paragraph C through G. So there's some pretty strict requirements there. And again, these will continue to apply when the CMMC program is implemented into contracts and required for acquisition. So how these relate to the CMMC program is CMMC level 1 is the same thing as FAR 52.204-21. It's the exact same requirements. However, the CMMC program has broken them out into 17 controls. If anybody wants to go back in that FAR clause and look at it, control 9 is actually 3 different requirements. It's 3 different cybersecurity controls. The CMMC program just broke that out and made them 17. CMMC level 2 is encompassed, and CMMC level 1 is self-assessment only, or the language now is called self-affirmation. So contractors go into the SPRS system and they will self-affirm that they are meeting these requirements. And that is the only requirement for level 1. So that's if a contractor is handling federal contract information. Then we have CMMC level 2, and there will be 2 levels for CMMC level 2, self-affirmation or self-assessment, and then the CMMC level 2 C3PAO is how it will read in a procurement. That is the requirement for a certification. So this is directly aligned with the DFARS 7012 clause, and it is the evaluation of 320 assessment objectives that are covered across those 110 controls that many of you probably heard about. So revision CMMC program is written directly to revision 2. That's explicitly what it says in the program. But in an assessment, an assessor is looking at all of the assessment objectives that are covered under the 110 controls. So for example, the first control has 6 assessment objectives. The organization for the information system where they're handling CUI, they have to meet all 6 assessment objectives to have that first control marked met. If one of them is not marked met, then the entire control is marked not met. So contractors should really focus on 320 assessment objectives, not 110 controls, and those can be found in NIST 800-171A. They are also evaluating whether the cloud services that are being used to handle CUI are FedRAMP moderate authorized or equivalent. So the key takeaway from this is that CMMC level 2 is evaluating parts of DFARS 7012, but not the entire requirement. or not the entire regulation, excuse me. CMMC level 3 is for the most sensitive CUI programs. There's not currently any indication which programs are going to require a level 3 requirement. The only one where it has been signaled is the Golden Dome project. But beyond that, we're not sure which programs will require this. It is 24 additional controls from a supplementary document called NIST 800-172. And it is very specific implementations from NIST 800-171. So there's flexibility in how the level 2 controls can be implemented. And if breaking it down easily, CMMC level 3 is just saying to implement certain controls, you have to do it in this very certain way. For example, you have to have a 24/7 security operations center, which is not, you have to have a security operations center doing cybersecurity monitoring in level 2, but it doesn't have to be 24/7. And then the assessment objectives for that can be found in NIST 800-172A. Now, the entire CMMC program is really broken out into 2 regulations. One is the CMMC program, which was presented on in this First Friday series last December when it was initially released. And that is the program that allows contractors to become certified with their information security system. So that was step 1. That was the first part of 2 parts of having CMMC be in contracts. So over the past 11 months, contractors have gone through the certification process. There are somewhere around 450 contractors that are currently certified as part of that initial rollout of the CMMC program. We are now coming into the second part where the CMMC clause or the CMMC acquisition clause, DFARS 252.204-7021, will be put into contracts, and DoD contracting officers and program managers will put in CMMC requirements into the acquisitions after November 10th. So this is where ultimately the rubber's going to meet the road with CMMC being required for contract award. So it will be in all DoD contracts with FCI and CUI. So essentially a CMMC requirement, level 1, 2, or 3 will eventually be in every single government contract. It is only for new awards, and eventually it will include option years on contracts. DoD can put it in if there's a contract modification. And the program managers are the only ones that are authorized to assign a level per contract. Contracting officers as well. The key thing that contractors should know is that they have no way to decide what the CMMC level is that's going to be on a contract. They cannot argue for a waiver. Only the program manager can determine if there's a waiver, and there's a very strict process for a waiver to be approved, and it can only be approved by about 6 personnel inside the DoD. It is highly unlikely that they will do a waiver, and the only reason that I've been told that they would do a waiver is for a very serious contractual need, and that they're finding it unlikely that will happen. There is technically it's a 3-year phased rollout of CMMC. It's going to, they say it's over a 4-year period, but phase 1 it's a 4-phase rollout. Phase 1 starts on Monday. So at a minimum in phase 1, in year 1, there will be a CMMC level 1 requirements put into new awards, and CMMC level 2 self-affirmation requirements, self-assessment requirements put in for contracts with controlled unclassified information. However, the DoD has the discretion to put CMMC level 2 certification requirements into new contracts during year 1 as the program managers and contracting officers see fit. Then in year 2, we'll start to see by default, they will have CUI requirement or certification requirements for level 2. And we'll start to see some level 3 requirements in some contracts, and it will continue to increase until the beginning of year 4, where the full rollout will occur. And we'll see CMMC requirements in every new contract award. It'll be included in every option year for contracts that were signed prior to the CMMC program being enforceable. So contractors have to be aware that this is absolutely coming. And we'll talk about one of the, in the next slide here, we'll talk about one of the use cases where DoD has already used their discretion to put CMMC Level 2 certification requirements into the first year of the program. So some key elements of the CMMC program and the acquisition is that there is standards acceptance, but it's only for assessments that have been performed by DoD or in a voluntary CMMC assessment program called the Joint Surveillance Voluntary Assessment Program. So organizations that have ISO 27001 or some other internationally known information security certification that is not going to have reciprocity with the CMMC Level 2 requirements. The scoping for CMMC is a little bit different than what is directly written into the framework it's based off of, which is NIST 800-171. So it's very important to make sure that the organization is scoping to those 5 scoping categories within the system that they are using to handle CUI and CUI only. For some organizations, that's going to be in an enterprise approach. A lot of times we're going to see that with smaller businesses. Larger organizations, they're going to have what is commonly referred to as an enclave, a subset, a secondary network where they're handling that information. They want to scope both of those properly because it's going to help minimize the cost of the entire implementation. In the program, there's also an allowance for what's called plans of action and milestones, or POAMs. So there is a algebra equation that exists where contractors can get a conditional certification where they, as long as they have a score in their assessment of 88 or higher. So the scoring methodology, the highest score is 110. So the contractor's meeting every control. Or they have met 0 controls and their score is negative 203 because they're weighted subtractors for controls marked not met. So as long as the score is 88 and there are certain controls that are met, so there are certain controls that cannot, they have to be marked met. They're not allowed to be on the list. As long as they meet those 2 factors, they can have a conditional certification for 6 months. And they have 6 months to close out those controls to get to a perfect 110. But ultimately, a perfect 110 score is required for final certification. There are affirmations now. So the language is a little bit different here. Previously with self-attestation, they've changed the language to self-affirmation. And from what legal teams tell me, there is a difference legally because this aligns better with the False Claims Act because there is very serious legal liability for what is now called the authorizing official. So there is a person that internally is going to have to go into SPRS, even if after an organization gets certified, every year they have to continue to self-affirm that the organization is continuing to meet the requirements year in and year out, and that they've done an internal self-assessment to confirm and verify that they are implementing the security controls as they were certified. That person is called the affirming official, and there is personal liability to them. So it's pretty serious because there are a lot of lawsuits happening via the False Claims Act about cybersecurity self-affirmations being false. Another element that contractors need to be aware of is the DFARS 7020 clause you see on the screen here. This is what I call the spot check clause, and we have seen this happen with our clients already, where the DoD, an organization called DIPCAC within DoD, Defense Industrial Based Cybersecurity Assessment Center, they're the CMMC assessor equivalents internal to DoD. They will reach out to a contractor randomly, and they'll say, "We're coming to assess you," and this gives them the authority to do that. The big difference is they are assessing against all of the DFARS 7012 requirements. So everything related to incident reporting, are your cloud service providers meeting paragraph C through G? Those are things that are not checked in a CMMC assessment. So they can do that at any time for any reason, and it doesn't matter what size the organization is. We have seen them do it with a 4-person organization. That is something that they're doing to keep contractors honest on their compliance throughout that 3-year certification lifecycle. Contractors can also use external service providers, and they can be certified and provide a benefit to those organizations in the assessment. So, for example, Athon Security, we are categorized as an external service provider, and we're level 2 certified. And what that means for our clients is when we go through an assessment with them, when we talk about scoping again real quick, We are categorized as what's called a security protection asset because we provide IT support, cybersecurity monitoring, and compliance support. We have privileged access. So with us being level 2 certified, the network we're providing support from is within the scope of our clients' environments, but because we're certified, it doesn't have to be evaluated. That was a key element for a security measure and a cost-saving measure that allowed contractors to reduce the cost of their assessment when they're using external parties. And there are also organizations, C3PAOs, so the assessment organizations, CMMC third-party assessment organizations. There are some out there that they will not assess an organization that is using an external service provider unless that service provider is level 2 certified. So some of the assessors are even making this business decision because they have deemed it to be a risk in the assessment for their clients and the contracting community. So something to consider when you're looking at providers. And contractors also have to flow this down. So this isn't just for primes, it's for subcontractors as well. The CMMC, not only does the 7012 clause have to be flowed down to subcontractors, but the 7021 clause, the CMMC requirement, has to be flowed down as well. So if there's a certification requirement at the prime contract, every subcontractor that is handling CUI in the performance of that contract has to also be CMMC level 2 certified. This is also very helpful with managing data, and I think the DoD has done this in part because they really want contractors to focus on making sure they're only providing data to their subcontractors that they need to do their job. One of the most well-known breaches related to CUI is the F-35 program, and the entire schematic of the F-35 was being provided to subs when they only were making a small part in the production of that fighter jet. So that was a cause of some data exfiltration as well that could have been avoided by properly flowing down data. The ecosystem for the CMMC program, for anyone on the webinar that's familiar with the ISO certification world, set up in the exact same way. So at the very top, there's an accreditation body that has a no-cost contract and MOU with the DoD called the Cyber AB. They stood up the entire ecosystem. They actually have to have an ISO certification for accrediting the certification bodies, which are the next bullet point there. They're the certified, or it's now called, I think they're called CMMC third-party assessment organizations. And then you have your CMMC certified assessors that are conducting the assessments, of which there have to be 2 on every assessment, regardless of the organization size. So there's always a lead assessor and a junior assessor at a minimum on every assessment. So moving into some of the requirements and some of the things that contractors need to be aware of beginning Monday, November 10th. At a minimum, every contract is going to have federal contract information. So contractors, if they are making sure that they're meeting these requirements, they need to go into SPRS and affirm that they are meeting the level 1 requirements. You got to do it on an annual basis. So making sure that there's familiarity with those level 1 controls, going into SPRS and affirming that they are doing that when they are actually implementing those 17 controls is going to be required starting Monday for new contract awards. So the contracting officers, if there is a level 1 requirement in the contract for award, the contracting officer will be required to go into SPRS and confirm that that level 1 box is checked. The contractor has affirmed that prior to providing the award. And that was not one where there's not a score, because level 1, it's all or nothing. Either the contractor is affirming they're meeting all of the controls, or they can't affirm that they're meeting level 1. It's not like CMMC level 2 where you can have a score and there's a little bit of flexibility there. Another component here that is not directly in the contract, but it is not in the contract, but not in the regulation about CMMC, but it is a memo from the DoD that was published over this summer. There is an accelerated C3PAO or certification requirement for level 2. So over the summer, the DoD CIO office released a memo stating that any CUI that falls in the 5 defense groupings in the National CUI Registry, if the data falls under those groupings and the categories under those groupings, it's going to require a CMMC level 2 certification immediately upon the implementation of the CMMC acquisition rule. So what this means is data that is categorized as controlled technical information, critical infrastructure security information, DoD, naval nuclear propulsion information, privileged safety information, and unclassified controlled nuclear information defense is going to require a level 2 certification beginning next Monday. If contractors are unclear what type of data that they may be handling that falls in these categories, I urge you to go to the DoD CUI program, the DoD CUI registry, which can be found at dodcui.mil. And if you go on there and look at the DoD categories and click on defense, it'll show those 5 defense groupings, and you can drill down into them and you can read the category description. And there are examples given under there of example types of data that fall under this category and the authorities associated with making those types of data controlled unclassified information. It is my opinion that many SAME members will be falling under DoD critical infrastructure security information and privileged safety information, possibly controlled technical information as well. So I encourage you all to go to dodcui.mil and look at that, look at those categories and the category description. So some benefits and impacts here. Remember, this is a common misconception that I see in the marketplace. This compliance requirement does flow down. So 70, I know we already covered it, but just want to reiterate 7012 and 7021, the original CUI clause and the CMMC clause do flow down to subcontractors, and first tier contractors are required to flow it down as well if the data that they're flowing down to their subs and teaming partners are controlled unclassified information with the CMMC requirements. Subcontractors will probably see this requirement show up earlier in their subcontracts or be required by their primes to meet these requirements before the primes are required contractually with the DoD. So keeping in mind that the CMMC acquisition 7021, it's first going to be at the prime level. And then, but the contracts today have already had the 7012 clause in them for 9 years, and they've been required to flow that down for 9 years. We are already seeing some large primes, some mega primes like Lockheed Martin and a couple of other more defense weapons organizations. They are already saying very publicly that their subs need to get CMMC level 2 certified immediately. So they are going to be pushing this down because one thing that about the CMMC program that will help them meet their CMMC or their DFARS 7012 requirements, they can much more easily affirm that their contracting base is meeting the 7012 requirements if they're CMMC level 2 certified. And because that's a private B2B contract, they are allowed to do that, pending some legal contracts and such. Non-compliance is a risk of removal from vendor lists. We are seeing this as well, where if the vendor is not level 2 certified or demonstrating that they are not pursuing CMMC level 2 certification, if there's CUI being handled, or they can demonstrate that they're signed up for a C3PAO assessment, they are being removed from prospective partner lists. We're seeing the flip side of this though as well. Compliance is building trust, and it is making some organizations more competitive. There are, as I mentioned before, there are about 450 organizations that are level 2 certified. There are, I think, about 26 or 27 organizations like Athon Security that are external service providers. And I don't know how many of them perform DoD contracting. So if we were just to say that very few of them do, basically you could say about 425 contractors are certified. We have helped 10 of those companies get certified, and I can tell you that our clients are already seeing an increase in interest in partnering and teaming because this requirement is being pushed down now. So we can help in multiple ways. So as I mentioned, we are an external service provider. So we provide not only consulting, but we perform cybersecurity implementation. So this would be Cybersecurity engineering, we do systems integration. We provide MSP support, which is like IT service. We provide MSSP support, which is managed security service provider, which means we provide cybersecurity monitoring, incident remediation, all wrapped in a compliance wrapper, if you will. So it's all focused around, all we do is support CMMC level 2 and level 3 with contractors wanting to meet those requirements or needing to, and providing that cybersecurity expertise. That's a reason that I'm a lead certified assessor. I don't actually do assessments, although I have done an assessment before. We want our clients knowing that people that are working with them know this requirement inside and out. We have other we have other certified assessors, and we have certified professionals on staff. And we work with a lot of clients that handle export control data. So we exclusively deliver our solutions and our consulting with U.S. personnel, U.S. persons. We reliably bridge that gap. So we've worked hard, especially we work with enterprise clients, but we also have a lot of small, medium business clients that we support where we are their IT support and their cybersecurity support, and trying to be a one-stop shop, effectively be a one-stop shop for them. We guide companies through assessment, remediation, and certification prep. So we work with some organizations. We're helping them understand where they are or the work that they've done so far, which we call before you've started working, we call it a gap analysis. The other part of it on the end is an organization been doing work. It's a readiness review and helping them understand where they are and what gaps need to continue to be closed, or providing white glove service to help them to get where they need to go. We also write all the policies and procedures in the system security plan for our clients to help them make sure they're satisfying all 320 assessment objectives and strengthen that long-term compliance with ongoing monitoring and sustainment of the information security program. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that we actually have had one client that has already been through a second assessment because they went through a voluntary assessment in the voluntary assessment program, and that 3-year period was up. The assessor asked for evidence from that 3-year period based on the timelines that they gave for performing some of their security functions and assessment reviews. They said, show me this artifact from this quarter because you said you do this quarterly. So maintaining that requirement consistently is going to be very important for the second assessment. We are very flexible in how we work. So, we try to meet organizations where they are in their journey. And we do not have a cookie cutter approach. We work with organizations. We have some manufacturing clients that are 90% on premises with their IT infrastructure. And then we work with professional services companies and building envelope companies that are 100% in the cloud. For when we work with a variety of tools, so we try to meet organizations where their operational needs are. Couple of key takeaways. This is happening. I know that there's been a lot of questioning about whether it's happening, even with the government shutdown. One thing to keep in mind is that this was already published as a final rule in the Federal Register back in September. So the government shutdown does not affect the enforcement of this rule beginning on Monday, even though there may be no new awards coming out or no RFPs being dropped during the shutdown. It does not change what is already written into the Code of Federal Regulation. Primes and OEMs are demanding evidence of compliance more and more frequently, and I fully expect that to increase rapidly after Monday, and especially after the new year. I'm not ignorant to the fact that the holiday slowdown is going to happen with everything, and I think that there will be a little bit of a lull because of the holiday season. But come January, I think that there's going to be a very, very hard push from primes and OEMs about this because it's going to get very real in 2026. I encourage you to start acting and making plans now if you haven't already, and really looking at your pipeline. I don't want everybody to come away from this saying, if I don't get certified in February, then I'm going to lose all of my work. That is certainly not the case. DoD is expecting this to take 8 years, even though there is a 4-phase rollout that will happen over a 3-year period because of the contract life cycle. They're expecting this to be fully in every single contract over an 8-year period. So there is a timing requirement to when to get certified, when does it make the most business sense. But part of that is looking at your pipeline, looking at when your contract renewals are and other aspects of that. But also keeping in mind that there is an opportunity here to earn new work that maybe wasn't on your pipeline because competitors are not getting certified or may not be focusing on that. So there is a unique business development opportunity here I'm going to argue and say that it's probably a once in a lifetime opportunity because I see a lot of organizations putting their head in the sand on this still. So I encourage you to look at it very closely. Thank you all for your time today. I think we've got maybe 10 or 15 minutes left open for Q&A.
Well, Derek, really appreciate that, and thank you for the breakdown. It's a very there's a lot of detail that goes into CMMC. So for everyone on the call, if you have a question, please feel free to enter it in the chat so make sure we can cover it. But why don't we dive into it right now? John Ryan has a question. Is there a time frame for the enclave must be working prior to the audit?
So for the initial audit, what we're typically seeing from assessors is they want to see that the information security program that's been built has been performed at least one time. So I've actually been in an assessment where we rapidly got an organization certified within a 2-month period, starting from scratch, but it was a very specific infrastructure. It was 100% in the cloud. And the assessor just wanted to see, hey, we know that it's new. They just implemented it. Show us that you performed this one time and that you have a document about how you're going to do it moving forward. I've also been an assessor on an assessment where DoD was the authority, where it was a very similar situation. They had just a month before finalized the environment and officially signed off on it as authorized, and they've been performing the program for 1 month. Now, the one thing, while that sounds great, you're probably hearing from a lot of organizations that like you need to plan for 12 months for this. I want to make it very clear that the use case for us was if they had a complex environment, we would not have committed to that 2-month period. The other factor here is that client paid a premium for that kind of service because that is not our normal time frame. So time is certainly money. And what's the old saying, Whitney? If you want something fast, cheap, and good, pick two. Well, they knew they couldn't pick cheap because they needed it good and they needed it fast. And that's definitely going to apply in this space.
Excellent. So this is from D. Weston. What is the best approach to verify subs and supplier information when primes do not have access to the SPRS and or third-party certifications and or status of?
So they should be asking for the third-party certification. So there is an actual digitally signed certificate from the C3PAO that is provided to the organization when they get certified. And that same certification goes into a CMMC instantation in EMAS that is reflected in SPRS. And that's where the government goes to look at it, where D. Weston is correct. The contractor does not have access to that for their subs. What they can say to the subs is, send us your certificate. And then the prime can verify the certificate signature that it is from the C3PAO because it is an officially signed certificate with the DoD Medium Assurance Certificate.
Got it. So let me ask you this. So what are some of the common misconceptions that organizations have when preparing for the CMMC Level 2, and how can they proactively be addressed?
I am seeing a lot of organizations that think that this is a pencil whip exercise and that they can meet a lot of this by policy. And I will say that I've also noticed this typically organizations that have an ISO 27001 certification, because with 27001, with that ISO certification, there's a lot of flexibility in how you meet those requirements and they can be met by policy. These 320 assessment objectives, they are very specific in these assessments, and they want to see this, they being the assessors, want to see the system security plan written in detail to the 320 assessment objectives, and they are technical requirements. So for example, like a very quick, easy one, they want you to control the use of removable media. If an organization is saying that they're allowing the unlimited use of removable media and control it by policy, the assessor is going to ask a bunch of questions about how you're monitoring the use of that removable media and verifying that users are not exfiltrating CUI through removable media. That's going to be a rabbit hole that I would not want them to go down if it were me, right? So technical control and implementation is absolutely necessary, and then documenting thoroughly how it's done. And a great example of doing the work up front and being thorough up front is going to make your assessment experience smoother, and it's going to make the maintenance of your program smoother. Not too dissimilar from what I hear the business development process is like in this industry, right? You do a lot of work up front, plan it out, and then you just go perform everything you wrote out after you got the award. This is no different.
Got it. Pat Kingsman's asking, has the Department of War made an assessment of the availability or capacity of third-party assessors to complete the level 2 assessment of the defense industrial base in a timely fashion?
Not that I'm aware. The last that I've heard of this is that they are saying they are letting the free market dictate the CMMC assessment process. They are not dictating the cost of the assessment. They are not getting involved in priority of contractors. They're requiring that organizations make business decisions. And I think that was actually the phrase that they used in the rule, was that it is a business decision to get CMMC certified and to be pursuing contracts with this requirement. So organizations need to be looking at their pipeline. I will tell you that the Cyber AB reports monthly on the ecosystem numbers. I won't say they report on the capacity, but they regularly let the ecosystem and anyone that wants to attend those town halls know how many C3PAO organizations there are, and more importantly, how many assessors there are. And the numbers are going up every month, and they are increasing in a higher percentage every month. And I can expect that to continue to increase with the rule being finalized next week, or I should say enforceable next week.
And so, no, I think that's a great breakdown. And so Emmett from DLR Group asks you, do you foresee any instance where small or flow down subs can expense the costs of the certification?
So I'll do the old lawyer thing first and say that I'm not an accountant, but I'll tell you what I've heard. The cost to become compliant I've been told, is not allowable. It's a business decision to do business with the federal government. It's a business decision to do business with the Department of Defense. It's the cost of entry. What I have also been told is that this is an allowable cost to maintain the certification. So this is what I don't know. I don't know whether the initial certification is allowed as an allowable cost, because it could be perceived to be the cost of doing business to get the initial contract. But because it has to be maintained, the cost of certification afterwards, all the costs associated with maintaining the certification requirements, whether that's software licensing costs, outsourced third-party vendor costs, labor costs internal labor costs associated with maintaining the requirement. All of these things are contractual needs to perform on a contract that are allowable. You need to talk to an accountant about how you may need to amortize that, based on how you do like your cost structure for your contract. That's definitely not my area of expertise. But all of those things, again, from what I've been told, are allowable and should be considered. What I can tell you from, technically secondhand experience, but I've already seen it happen to one contractor. We hear this, I've heard this objection for many years that is going to start to go away. They say, well, we don't need to get level 2 certified because we're working on government furnished equipment and it's on the government's network. Well, the first thing is that the CMMC program actually requires contractors to categorize the GFE that they do have as specialized assets. It's one of the 4 categories. So they're not using that as an exemption or exclusion, because we have also seen contractors forward CUI to their company workstation email and therefore work on their company computer because they've said it's easier to do so because their workstations are better or the security restrictions are less, whatever the reason. But what I found the most interesting is last year, I worked with an organization where the government took their GFE away because they put a 110 score in SPR, said, great, we now know that you're meeting the requirements to handle this data appropriately. We're not going to let you use GFE anymore because you can use it on your company computer. And that, in my opinion, is how the government is going to offset this increased rates that they're expecting to see on their contracts. Instead of managing GFE that the contractors are using, that cost is transferring to the cost that the contractors are going to be putting in for maintaining these requirements.
Interesting. Okay. Wow. So basically, make sure you have a good accountant and get their breakdown and analysis on how it could play out both short term, but over the life cycle of the contract and as well as through your organization. Okay. I think Evan has a follow-up. Do you foresee GSA and other non-DoD agencies using CUI to follow the exact same process and timeline?
I do. So they're not the focus of this webinar, but there is a FAR CUI rule. So it will be applied to civilian agencies, and it has already gone through. I've gotten too familiar with the rulemaking process over the past 5 years, so I can tell you that it's in the end stages of being finalized. So it's already gone through the proposed phase for public comment. Public comment has been provided to, and it is now being adjudicated by the FAR Council. Who knows how long that could take? The rulemaking process is very long, but essentially what it said in the proposed rule, it has all of the requirements of CMMC except the certification part. So, Emmett, I appreciate the question because it is one little nuance about the CMMC program and the way that it was put into the Code of Federal Regulation is it was put in the defense section of the Code of Regulation 32 CFR. It is available for every department and agency to use to protect their own CUI. So even if the FAR CUI rule is finalized in the way it was proposed, where it doesn't require certification for CUI, other departments and agencies can decide to use a CMMC program to verify the implementation because they have to meet all the same requirements. And it would make a lot of sense because they've already seen and DoD's already demonstrated it, that self-affirmation doesn't really work. So, it would make sense that the civilian agencies would not want to be subjected to that type of risk.
No, that's good to know on that. So got a couple other questions. So how should small and mid-sized contractors balance cost, complexity, as well as compliance when deciding how to meet all the DFARS requirements when protecting CUI?
Scoping is unbelievably important with meeting these requirements. Making sure that you know where the data could be handled, because this is one thing that we commonly hear too, is we don't know what CUI is. We don't know where it is. We don't know what it is. DoDCUI.mil is where you need to go. It is by far the best resource for helping to start identify that, because then you want to identify where the CUI touches inside your network, where it comes in, who's handling it, what locations it's being stored in the network. Is it on SharePoint? Is it on Google Sites? Are people handling it on their local computer? Because then if we're just taking a small business approach, let's say there's a small business with 20 employees, 20 users, and they find that 10 of those users are handling controlled unclassified information. Well, for those 10 users, you're going to want to make sure you have certain security tools and certain monitoring and certain logging being done for those 10 users that meets the requirements, and that's going to cost more money. And then the other 10 users, you have a lot of flexibility in how you handle the security monitoring and the security controls that are implemented for them. So that's going to be organizationally defined, and you can save costs there. But if you don't know where the CUI data is flowing or potentially flowing, it's a lot of contractors I've talked to would initially look at all 20 and say, hey, we're looking at the cost for all 20 of these people, and that's not a great way to do it. I will also say that I think that using cloud services for small businesses is the way to go. On-premises infrastructure is much more expensive relatively to using cloud services. Unless you already have on-premises infrastructure and you can't use it and you can't accept it as a sunk cost, that is the only use case I see for that. Unless, of course, you're in manufacturing or some other environment, and because there are a couple of use cases where using cloud services is not great for operations.
Great. Well, hey, if there's any other questions, I think Derek's happy to stay a few minutes afterwards, but we're going to wrap it up for today. So again, thank you everyone for your questions as well as participating in today's session. We really appreciate your time here today. Definitely very informative, very timely. Monday is right around the corner. So thank you again for attending. But before we wrap up our program today, I would like to share some upcoming events that we do have planned. So please make sure you mark your calendar for some local events as well as some national SAME events. Join us next month for our last first Friday of the year on Friday, December 5th, which is FAR reform updates, insights on legislative and executive policy shaping GovCon. Join us for a timely and informative session with Sam Lee, one of the foremost experts on federal small business contracting policy. Sam is a former SBA policy director and founder of GovCon Intelligence. He brings a unique insider's perspective on how recent legislative actions, executive orders, and regulatory changes, including the sweeping FAR overhaul, will impact government contractors of all sizes. Registration is open today. And are you interested in sharing your knowledge and current educational topics from our First Friday series with our members? We are now accepting presentation abstracts for 2026. Visit our website to learn more and submit your topic today. Sponsorships are also available to help support this popular program. You wouldn't want to miss any of the upcoming SME national events. Let us know in the chat if you're coming to Phoenix for the National Federal Small Business Conference in just 2 weeks. So for Accelerate Readiness with fantastic sessions, speakers, and networking to build strong partnerships and teaming opportunities in the AEC industry. So Bree and I will be returning as speakers for our popular series on how you can navigate AI in your marketing business development outreach. So we hope we can see you in Phoenix. And can you believe 2026 is just around the corner? So SME, the JETC Conference and Expo will be held in Portland, Oregon, May 19 through 21. If you're interested in sharing your knowledge at this premier training conference, now is the time to submit your abstract. Learn more at samejetc.org. So we have a big schedule here at the DC Post. Next week, join us at our favorite speakeasy for the 5th annual new fiscal year networking social. Join us for our VIP guests, annual sponsors, and the SAME AEC community for a fun evening at Capo DC with our favorite mixologist, Rohit, providing cocktails and creations. We got prizes and fantastic networking, so you can kick off FY26 with the DC Post. Register today and reserve your spot and get the password to enter the speakeasy. The DC Post and Nova Post Leadership and Mentoring Program is celebrating our class with graduation dinner on Friday, December 5th. Join us as we celebrate the accomplishments of our young professionals, revisit our sessions with guest speakers, and enjoy graduation dinner at Maggiano's in Chevy Chase. Registration will open next week. If you know a young professional that would like to apply for a prestigious program, applications will open next week and will close on December 12th. Reach out to Bree if you'd like to know more about the program. I was a graduate of the program, thoroughly enjoyed it, so I highly recommend if you know anybody to join up for LMP. So each year, the DC Post and Nova Post support wreaths across America at Arlington National Cemetery. This year, the wreath lane will be held on Saturday, December 13th. I'll be leading it, and more information will be forthcoming on that. After the morning event, join us for a no-host lunch and gathering at Open Road in Roslyn nearby. If you can't volunteer, you have the option of donating a wreath to Wreaths Across America. Learn more on our event page for how you can contribute and volunteer to honor our fallen service members. Our 30th annual Awards and Military Service Branch program is coming up on Wednesday, January 28th at the National Press Club. Nominations are open now. It's a great time to recognize someone who has made an impact in the military, government, or AEC community. Registration is opening on December 1, and sponsorship opportunities are available for those who'd like to support this special anniversary event. The Transatlantic Energy Security Symposium has been rescheduled to February 4th at the National Press Club. Join the AEC community for this one-day event focused on energy securities. You'll hear more about policy updates and insights directly from experts in the legislative and executive branches. Registration is open at smeenergysecurity.org. Save the date. It's out for the APA Federal Planning Workshop, which is returning to Washington, D.C. on March 31st and April 1st at the National Press Club. The two-day conference and SME DC is partnering with APA Federal Planning Division, bringing together planners, architects, engineers, and facility professionals to talk about policy updates, planning strategies, and collaboration across agencies. So mark your calendar now. So please be sure to visit the DC Post for a full list of our education and social events throughout the year. Connect with us on LinkedIn and share it as we share industry news, event photos, all while building a strong network throughout the AEC industry. If you'd like to reach a global community of more than 7,000 architecture, engineering, and construction leaders with the annual DC Post sponsorship, you have the opportunity to leverage our networks and showcase your firm with visibility and international recognition you won't get anywhere else. Support the annual program sponsorship, just like the First Friday series or an individual event throughout the year, like our upcoming Transatlantic Symposium at the National Press Club. Check out all the benefits of sponsorship and support the mission of the DC Post in your community today. So again, thank you all for attending our first Friday webinar or first Thursday webinar series. And Derek, thank you very much for educational content. Thank you to Procon for letting me crash at their office today. And please be on the lookout for the November information to download today's documents before you leave today. Look for an email labeled document delivery. The subject line for the slides, PDH certificate, opt-in list of registered attendees, and we will post a recording on the DC Post website later on this month. You may also get an email from our presenter with more information on what was presented here today, and you can sign up for the newsletter, announcements, and upcoming events. So thank you again to our DC Post First Friday sponsors, Fox Rothschild, KCCT, Parsons, and Stantec. On behalf of myself, Bree Beal, and Samantha Long, have a great weekend and look forward to seeing you at the next SAME event.